College Football Preview 2020 with Robbie Veno. I am Drew Martin. We're previewing all the head coaching changes throughout the offseason in college football. Today we got three teams up: Boston College, Colorado, and Colorado State. Robbie Veno, welcome in. How you doing today, buddy?
I am good this afternoon, Drew. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Trying to make it through, concentrate on the positives. We've had the stock market up pretty big here the last 2 days, so that I guess is a positive. But overall, we'll try to find some winners here with college football. Robbie, I'm not sure if you saw, we got season win totals from Caesars in Las Vegas putting them out. Did you get a look at any of those?
I did. I'll give a quick shout out to our one of our fearless leaders here, Johnny Detroit. Always good to me. Sent those through email so I could print them out. Difficult to print off of Twitter. I did see them, but tough to print off of there. So, yeah, I got to look at them a little bit, Drew, and not totally in depth, but a couple of things, that looked a little bit interesting. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and first team up here, we got Boston College in the ACC. It's an interesting handicap with Boston College, just offensively, kind of a little bit. I don't know how to explain them too much, but every now and again, kind of the tough-minded team. But talk about coaching changes, which is what we're trying to focus on here with not having spring football. A lot of times that could be a fade going into this upcoming season, depending how you want to look at it. With the season win totals, we're seeing Boston College 5 flat, just meaning, a 5 and 7 would give you a push, and minus 110 both to the over and to the under. So Boston College season win total at 5. What are you seeing, I guess, preview-wise this upcoming season for Boston College, Robbie?
Well, let's start with who's out on this coaching staff and who's in. We've known Steve Adazio to be there for quite a while. And in fact, Drew, his name's going to come up more than once during this podcast because one of the teams that we'll talk about is where he's headed or is actually planted right now. Jeff Hafley, Ohio State defensive coordinator and secondary coach last year, is the new head coach here at BC. Brings in his own offensive coordinator, a name that's familiar around college football, Frank Cignetti Jr., also NFL football. His last two jobs, Drew, as a coach were in the NFL. One with Green Bay as their quarterback's coach, one with the New York Giants as their quarterback's coach. So quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, those two seem to go hand in hand across the college football landscape about 90% of the time. But Frank Cignetti Jr. is your offensive coordinator here. Did not coach last season. So out for a year, back in this year. NFL quarterbacks coach, college coach as well. Defensive coordinator Tem Lakabu, another NFL guy, coached the Cincinnati Bengals linebackers last year. So you get a little bit of NFL flavor here to this coaching staff. The head coach, Jeff Hafley himself, was a DB's coach for the 49ers for 3 years, 2016 to 2018. So guys coming in to coach college program with more recent NFL experience than work in the college ranks. Offensively, we know Boston College as a team that, loves the power running game, right? A.J. Dillon, star running back here last year, now into the NFL draft in a couple of weeks. And prior to that, BC, always a run-first team. We're going to see more play-calling balance out of this team this year. This is going to be run more like a pro-style system, NFL system, where you have more in the pass game here, more intermediate routes, not as much to where we see quick screens and stuff like we're accustomed to seeing out of spreads in college football. Now we're going to get much more to pro, but just not as much with the power running game, Drew. They're going to try and split play calling up here. Going to have some tight end action. Obviously, NFL features tight ends, and college football, in most instances, does not. For BC, you'll probably see some of the tight end, and you're going to see, while they call it pro style, Drew, you're going to see an increase in tempo, which again lends itself to the out with the power running game, mindset that we have around BC. We think they're a kind of a slow to the line of scrimmage, hand it off, second down, hand it off. This is going to be a little bit of increased tempo, pro style, and it's going to have some RPO action to it. So there's a whole blend here, which is difficult to get into a playbook when you have certain personnel recruited for certain things, and now you have to have an expanded playbook with maybe NFL terminology coming into BC. It's a team that we talked last show about how important it is to get on the field with your players. This team had 5 practices, so they got nearly, not close to halfway through, because I guess 8 practices would be halfway through, 7.5, 8. But they got 5, which is more than a lot of people got. So they got to look at the personnel. They got to install some of that playbook on the field. They're a little bit more advanced than a bunch of the teams we're going to talk about. But I still don't think they're there, Drew. To me, offensively, this is a pretty big turnaround. I'm not going to call it a complete overhaul because some of the stuff stays. But it's a pretty good-sized switch in offenses. And I think you need more time than what they had to get this thing right. So look for BC maybe a little bit slow out of the gates. On the defensive side, again, with Tem Labaku here, you get a defensive system that's going to be 4-3. That's, NFL style 4-3 usually includes what Seattle likes to call a hybrid pass rusher, sort of that 4-3, 3-4 mix. For Boston College, you'll see a lot of that. The key to this is trying to get enough athletes up front. I don't know that BC has it at this point, Drew. We're going to find out, but it's a coach that, again, has to come in, pretty much overhaul a system, readjust his personnel, find out where linebackers might make better safeties, where defensive ends might make better linebackers. So to me right now, when you're going over all the changes that BC is going through, and a team that wasn't that good to begin with, let's face it, defensively, they were a wreck last year. When we get into team previews and we talk about Boston College's statistical numbers from last year, which were not good, not BC-like, you could almost take the approach that, hey, it can't get much worse than what it was last year. So overhaul or not, BC can't be much worse. We'll see how it goes. It's a team that, again, could have used the full spring practice, but they got more than most teams did. They did get a chance to look at this personnel and evaluate a little bit.
Right, great breakdown, man. I love just hearing your, the differences in the coaching coming in, and you brought up, the NFL, kind of more of an NFL style here. Do you think that's a good thing? Or would you rather see maybe, a high school coach elevated up or kind of more of that coaching tree from maybe a high school coach to a position coach to a coordinator to a head coach? Do you find either one more of a bet on, or do you like the kind of guys stepping from the NFL back to college football? Well,
I think, Drew, that when they switch from NFL back to college now, it's a little bit different than what we might have thought of it, even 5 years ago, not that long ago. Because when you look at this team, you have to think more of the LA Rams offense, the San Francisco 49ers offense, which is where, Hafley coached at San Francisco, where the NFL is going to, in some instances like LA and San Francisco and even more, they're going to some of this college RPO stuff. And that's right. What you're going to see here. So it's not this stagnant, traditional, so to speak, NFL type coaching when they come in. There's a little bit of difference and a little bit of college influence when these guys come back. So I think for that reason, these guys are probably not outdated. They're up to date with what's going on in college, and they're just incorporating what goes on at the upper level back into the college level. I think we saw a little bit with Missouri when Drew Lock was running that wide open spread and actually requested, when they were going to make an offensive coordinator change for his senior season, actually requested an NFL style coach to help him learn the drop back game more so he'd be more prepared, to call a couple plays with him under center so he'd be prepared. And they hired Derek Dooley in that instance. I think a lot of that is what we see here now in particular with this staff, and they should be very much modernized as far as college football is concerned, but with that formation base that looks more like an NFL style. We won't see 4 and 5 wideouts running around like we do the majority of college offenses right now. He's Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. All his work at Sportsmemo.
Feel free to follow me. Ask any questions on Twitter. Anything you want to hear on the show, guys. We're all about that on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. And also, reminder, 3 o'clock Eastern time, 12 o'clock Pacific. We got Meet the Experts. It's Tony Finn on with Prez Wager Talk. Also, a guest there from Las Vegas, I believe. Possibly. I'm not so sure I should give out his name. But shout out to Elliot in the chat. What's up, man? He's like in Tony Ferguson in the UFC. I don't disagree with you there. What's up, Chris Wager Talk? Johnny Detroit sending us the season win totals, Robbie. I thought that was a big help as well. I didn't even know that they were out. But next team up here, we got Colorado, and this is a surprising win total here, Robbie. The Buffaloes, obviously, coach heads out to Michigan State, I believe, and their win total just set at 3, Rob. And this was a Colorado team that was in the Pac-12 championship game not too many years ago. And with a season win total of 3, minus 120 to the over, looking at their schedule, Robbie, you can see why. They got Colorado State, obviously a heated rivalry there in the state of Colorado. Fresno State, not necessarily just a terrible team by any means. And then they go at College Station to at Texas A&M there. That's kind of a rough get-go. And then obviously into their 9-game Pac-12 schedule, starting off with Oregon and ending with Utah. Robbie, this is a tough schedule here. It's going to be really rough for Colorado to make a bowl game this year. You can see it in the season win total just set at 3. Again, Robbie, what's your opinion here on the Buffs?
Well, I think this was one head coaching move, Drew, that was highly questioned, even by the Colorado faithful. I mean, when this move went down, when this hire was made, there was a lot of noise, negative noise made toward the Buffalo's choice here of Karl Dorrell. Karl Dorrell, we know, has been around quite a while, back and forth, NFL, college football. His most recent stint was with the Miami Dolphins last year as the assistant head coach and wide receivers coach. Prior to that, with the New York Jets as a wide receivers coach from 2015, 2018. For those who don't remember Karl Dorrell as a player at UCLA, and then I believe he had some time with the Denver Broncos. He was a wide receiver, so by nature, he knows the position very, very well, has coached it in the NFL the last 5 seasons. Prior to that, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach at Vanderbilt. So you've got a guy, again, Drew, like we just talked about, who's got college experience, who's got NFL staff experience coming in. I think the one really good thing he did was, although he got rid of the offensive coordinator last year, Jay Johnson, what he did do was hang on to Darren Shiverini, who was the offensive coordinator prior to that, or at least co-OC, 2016, 2018. Now, for those who don't know, Shiverini's background, he was a Texas Tech Mike Leach disciple. He's an air raid guy. He brought his air raid principles, not as full-fledged OC, but as I think in the beginning, inside receivers coach, and then he turned to game day play caller. And when Johnson came in, this was an interesting offense, Drew. I remember we talked about this last year because this is the blend of all blends. They blended multiple. They blended air raid. Everything you could throw into a playbook, they threw in because they had 4 coaches on the offensive staff that all came from different offensive backgrounds. So they figured, well, even though we have one offensive coordinator, let's just incorporate everybody's ideas, everybody's principles, everybody's philosophies, and we'll have a playbook so vast that if we have to make in-game adjustments, we can go to a lot of things. In theory, it sounds great. To start the season last year, they really were praising their quarterback, Steven Montez. You remember him, Drew. He's kind of a dual-threat guy. Montez, bigger guy, good arm, but he could run as well. And it seemed like it would work, but Colorado just couldn't play any defense. They're going to go with that same style of playbook again, so that's where the good comes in. Not much changes here for the personnel to have to learn. The learning of this playbook is already there. Shiverini, I think now as the play caller, will probably get back to a little bit more of the air raid style, which may help. We'll see how the quarterback play is here, Drew. But I don't think the offense is a bad situation here for Colorado whatsoever. It's a team that was capable of putting up points last year against elite defenses. They had their struggles, but otherwise they put up points. I can remember playing a lot of overs with them and having them come through. Offense, not a problem. Defensively, here's a name you'll know because you're a Sun Belt guy, but Tyson Summers is the defensive coordinator here. He stays. It's a guy that, when Darrell came in, he could have gotten rid of, but he didn't. So, again, you're maintaining continuity on a defensive side. It's his second season here. He got to implement the whole defense last year. And, again, it was a wreck, right? Colorado wasn't good defensively. But you know what? We saw that at Baylor. Matt Rule and Phil Snow. First year they came in, changed the whole defense. Baylor was a wreck, and then they made a big stride defensively. Tyson Summers is a guy who, while he did not do well as a head coach, he's been a successful defensive coordinator in some places here. So I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the first year of the system didn't grasp as well with the players. A lot of assignments blown, especially in the secondary for this team. But keeping that continuity, to me, for Colorado was huge. So you're going to see them again. They're listing themselves as multiple. I would lean them slightly toward air raid on the spectrum, and they're going to be in Tyson Summers 3-4 for a second season. It's a team that was unable to have any spring practices, but if you're charting these as we go along, I would nullify that because the team already knows the offense. The team already knows the defense. So it's not like when college football comes back, there's a huge learning curve here. There's zero learning curve. Just got to get these guys on the field and improve, hopefully a recruiting class for Colorado to fill some of the spots where they were weak helps out. But to me, Colorado's not a bad situation this year.
And that's an interesting situation, Robbie, where a new head coach comes in and keeps the defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. You don't normally see that. Usually they come clean house. They want their guys in. Do you know if it was something Tyson Summers and Carl Darrell have a background together, or is this something where I guess Darrell just came in and was like, "Hey, Tyson Summers, I'll give you kind of a mulligan on last year." Do you know any kind of background there?
I think the entire answer to that, Drew, lies in the fact that Mel Tucker left at such a late date. Mel Tucker was there until the middle of February, which is past recruiting time, right? Recruits sign on the first week of February. Mel Tucker had, previously, maybe 2 weeks before he left, said he was going to stay at Colorado. All of a sudden, Mark D'Antonio leaves Michigan State. Mel Tucker flies and takes that job. Colorado's in a bind. They have to make a head coaching hire now at a very late date. Spring practice is basically 6 weeks away. They pick up Darrell. There's really no time to go out and scan for coordinators at that point. So you keep what's on board. I think it helps Colorado. If Darrell doesn't like what he sees this year, you probably could see Tyson Summers go, and he'll bring in his own guy. But I just think that Mel Tucker flew the coop at such a late date that it left Colorado in kind of a bind, and they had to just go with what they have.
Yeah, that was a situation in itself, and that makes total sense, Robbie. I didn't think about that. But sure, Tyson Summers probably had a grasp on some of those recruits, and so Darrell comes in and says, hey, pretty much his hands were tied. He had to keep him at that point. Robbie, we got one team left here in Colorado State. And guys, remember the 3:00 show. And it looks like we're going to have a schedule going forward here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel in terms of 1:00 and 3:00 throughout the week. So stay tuned for that. We'll likely have that finalized soon. And any questions, feel free to throw them out here in the chat box. All kind of college football betting questions we can get to before we shut down the show. We got Colorado State, last team up for today. Talking the Rams here, Robbie. And with the college football season win totals coming out at Caesars, tip of the cap to them on getting these out. 6.5 minus 160 towards the over. So almost the 6.5/7 in terms of their win total. Last year, bunch of losses, Robbie. I mean, they finished the season with 3 straight losses, losing to Air Force, Wyoming, and Boise State. It's kind of a rough year there for Colorado State after losing the opener to Colorado 52-31, and of course slated to have the Colorado State rivalry to kick off this year as well. So what are you thinking here with the Rams for Colorado State?
All right, well, here we go. Here's another pretty decent-sized philosophy change, Drew, because Steve Adazio, who was the head coach of BC, who we talked about earlier, now comes to Colorado State. And we focused in that BC analysis on the offense that he liked to run. It was very much a, kind of an Urban Meyer power spread, but out of pro formations, and run-based, heavy run-based. In this case, he comes in and he's going to turn the offense over to Joey Lynch. Those of you who follow the MAC know Joey Lynch as the former offensive coordinator at Ball State. When we get into late October, early November, and we have all those Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday MACtion games that we all love to go crazy on, you get to see the last couple of years of Joey Lynch running an offense. This is an up-tempo. His team last year, Drew, ran 76 plays a game. They're fast. Steve Adazio's given this offense to Joey Lynch. It's not going to be his hand the ball off to A.J. Dillon and let's see, if he can bust through to the second line of defense. This is going to be a quicker offense here. Joey Lynch is somewhat of a quarterback's guru. He produced some pretty good quarterbacks on the college level at Ball State, not necessarily pro success, but on the college level to go with the offense that he likes to run. You can expect speed and tempo out of this team. You can expect 3-4 wideouts, one back. It's not an offense that really does feature tight end much. He said that he really wants to stretch the field vertically with this team. Now, Colorado State's got some receivers here, Drew. I'm missing, as I speak here, I'm trying to remember the kid's name. 6'6" wide receiver who absolutely tore it up for Colorado State last year. But they have receivers on this team with the capability to get down the field. And
Warren Jackson.
There you go. Warren Jackson, for those who watched Mountain West football last year, was an absolute beast. I think he had near 20 catches in one game I saw last year. Very difficult cover. But the whole point here being that Colorado State under Mike Bobo last year was pretty much an up-tempo, let's get it down the field type team. So this isn't, aside from maybe some terminology, aside from maybe some motions and things like that pre-snap, it's not that big of a style difference on field than what they had last year. So we're going to see a little more tempo than we are used to seeing out of an Adazio type team. I think it's good, Drew. You and I had this, or I think you made this point last week, that you like to see when a head coach kind of gives the keys over to a coordinator. In this case, Adazio, who really has had his heart set, or at least has planted his feet firmly in one style of offense throughout his head coaching career, whether it be Temple or BC. He's given it up, and we'll see what happens here with Colorado State. I think their personnel fits much better to what Joey Lynch wants to run here. What Adazio is known for is a defense that is stifling, and his defensive hire here, Chuck Heater. Now, I think Chuck Heater, most would remember Chuck Heater from Marshall.
Yeah.
This guy is a aggressive defensive coordinator. This team, if nothing else, and these terms are way overused in college football, Drew. I find in any type of football, when you're talking about defensive system and scheme, when I do my notes every single year on these guys, these words come up inevitably in 90% of my write-ups. Physical, attacking, those types of things. All of those things are Chuck Heater. He's going to sell out to put pressure on the offense. He's going to leave his corners in man coverage. And it's one of those kind of, boom or bust style of defenses. But when he has the right personnel, like he had at Marshall a couple years, in group of five type football, you can smother teams when you have the right personnel with this defense. It can be very, very overwhelming. I think that Chuck Heater is probably a good hire. His philosophy goes along with Steve Adazio. We know Steve Adazio basically as a linebackers, strong safeties. Those are the types of guys that they put in the NFL. Linebackers, strong safeties, real hitters. And that's what Chuck Heater is all about, hitting. It's not a big switch. And defensively, Drew, unless you're going from a full formation change, like you're going from 4-3 to 3-4, where you have to reposition, restructure guys positionally, and they have to learn new assignments. If you're not doing that, boy, defensive football, and it's why oftentimes at the beginning of the year defenses are ahead of offenses, it's really just aggression and effort on the defensive side of the football. He's going to teach a lot of that. Colorado State needs a lot of improvement. They need a lot of help on depth. I don't think Chuck Heater can solve this thing in 1 year. But I think that the Colorado State defensive personnel is going to get weeded out real quick. I mean, if you don't tackle and if you don't and if you blow assignments, you're not playing for Chuck Heater. You have to be a certain style of player. In my mind, I would think of an NFL guy like Steve Atwater. You need guys like that to play for him. And he's going to find them. They had a chance to get in 5 practices, which isn't bad. I think the playbook knowledge, Joey Lynch's terminology and stuff on the offensive side might be one of the more difficult things for the team to get straightened out. But as far as on-field execution and stuff, I think they're used to what they're going to see here. It's just different voices. Lynch's voice is different now. Bobo kind of, I think his time had run out in Colorado State. Drew, he made a pretty decent improvement to start with, but then they leveled off and got worse. So I think maybe Mike Bobo's time had run out. Maybe it's time to hear some new voices. I kind of like these coaching hires, to tell you the truth. Steve Adazio, when he first gets there, he's one of these guys who comes in and fixes. And then when he fixes, it kind of levels off and you need to go to the next stage. Remember at Temple, he came in, he fixed that. Matt Rule took over and brought it a level higher. Boston College, he came in, he fixed that, and now we'll see if they go a level higher. But here I think he can fix Colorado State. Give him a couple of years. Coaching staff hires to me were pretty good. Chuck Heater, a lot of times you'll worry, Drew, about a real old guy relating to the 19, 20-year-olds, right? Chuck Heater, it's his 45th year in football. He's no spring chicken. But those defensive coaches that are aggressive like this, they have a way of relating to defensive personnel. Yeah. So just think, we thought Herm Edwards was going to be a flop, right? And Herm Edwards turned out to be great. I think Heater will be great. Defensive guys respond to guys with Chuck Heater's type attitude, no matter what the age is.
I think so too, Robbie. I know me and you have talked about this because that seems to be a sentiment. An old coach, let's say, past 60, comes in and it's like, oh man, is he going to be able to relate to 19 to 23-year-old kids? And a lot of people say no. I'm of the camp, and we said this about Herm Edwards. You do. If you remember when you were 20 years old, Robbie, you related, or at least I related, to the same a 65-year-old guy as I did to a 45-year-old guy. I didn't think that it really mattered when you were 20 years old, So I don't necessarily think that that's not a bet on because the guy's older, and especially with the name Chuck Heater being a defensive coordinator. I mean, it just doesn't get any more properly named than that, Robbie. So I'm thinking Colorado State here, 6.5. It's a tough handicap, man. When you look at their schedule, just kind of right out the gate, it's kind of a lot of toss-up games, like they're playing Vanderbilt and Oregon State. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be laying numbers, but those are winnable games before they get to the Mountain West. And the Mountain West this year, more so than even years past, kind of a toss-up. I think it really comes down to, yes, coaching, like you went over, Robbie, but also quarterback play.
Yeah,
a lot of these guys, they kind of had, 3 quarterbacks taking snaps last year. You'd like to see one of these guys kind of take the reins and really, play well. 2,800 yards for Patrick O'Brien, and I think he only played 6 or 7 games leading the team in passing yards. So not sure if you have any insight there on the quarterback position and anything else you wanted to throw out there, Robbie, before we kind of wrap this show up.
Yeah, real quick, for those watching that aren't familiar with Colorado State, I think when Steven Montez, and he had, he was vulnerable to big hits, Drew. He was a big guy who liked to run, and he got hurt. No question. Throughout his career, he got hurt either for a period during the game or for a length of time, a couple of games. But when he got hurt last year and O'Brien had to come in, he's not the same type of quarterback. He's much more of a passer, pure passer. But I think at that point, a lot of people had thought that, Colorado State's going to fall off a cliff offensively, and they just didn't do that. This kid's a good thrower of the football. Now, how he relates into Joey Lynch's offense, and just to give a little insight where that's concerned, Joey Lynch is comfortable coaching a drop-back guy, coaching a dual-threat guy. I don't think it matters with him. So I think O'Brien he showed last year he could have success. He's got a rapport built already with Warren Jackson in that receiving corps. So I don't think the drop-off, if any, is going to happen here at the quarterback position for Colorado State. He's a guy who got a lot of work, and like I say, really did much better than what was anticipated from a lot of, maybe, I guess, handicappers, bettors kind of felt like Colorado State, oh man, without Montez, they're doomed. Wasn't the case. Probably not the case this year. We'll see how Colorado State goes, but I don't think that these coaching hires were, bad by any means. I think these are pretty good coaching hires here, and they should be okay. They're in a league that's kind of a toss-up, right, Drew? Once we throw aside Boise State and San Diego State, usually this league is a toss-up after that. So we'll see. One-score games, can they get it done? Can they improve a little bit more on defense? That'll be the biggest key, how quickly Chuck Heater builds some depth and gets them to improve on the defensive side.
Sure, Robbie. In Montez for Colorado State, Patrick O'Brien.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Hill. Yeah, no, but Colin Hill, the guy you were talking about, right. Big prototype passer in himself. So,
and Colin Hill, real quick, Drew, was a guy that with quarterback often comes vocal leadership, and Colin Hill was the rah-rah guy for CSU. And a lot of times when you're in a huddle, people don't respond as well, or they respond differently to guys who are rah-rah loud inside the huddle than they do to quiet guys. O'Brien, a little bit more the quiet guy, didn't matter. Colin Hill, obviously, with the season injury, and O'Brien took over. So I don't think it's that big of a difference here for CSU. We'll see them roll on the offensive side. Let's see what they do for Heater on defense.
He's Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Guys, we'll be doing this show previewing 3 different teams in college football each and every Tuesday going forward, likely at the 1 o'clock Eastern time frame. So come back and join us. Also, remember today, 3 o'clock Eastern time, we got Meet the Experts, Tony Finn and Prez at Wager Talk here. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Best of luck. Stay safe, and we'll talk next week.